Welcome back to another episode of When Destiny Calls. I am Dr. Lahab Al-Samarrai, and with me today, as always, Christy Foster is here. Christy, how you doing?
Hello, Dr. Lahab. I'm doing much better today. Been sick for the last few weeks and my body's getting back to normal. I feel really great today, actually. Yeah, it's nice to have my health back.
That's good. And it's Friday the 13th that Christy reminded me. Tell us about Friday the 13th, Christy.
Well, Friday the 13th is a lucky day. I think in the past it's been thought as an evil day, and it isn't that. It's one of those days where I believe magic happens, and I would tell people to be more aware on these days because sometimes synchronicities happen that you weren't expecting. It's just a magical day.
The universe speaks to you during
on Friday
days.
the 13th.
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Yeah, like Halloween.
Yes.
The universe speaks to you. So if you open your ears to the possibility of magic, then that will come today. Okay. So today we thought we'd explore the Queen archetype. We talk a lot about the magician archetype, and we have talked about the lover archetype. We have talked about the warrior archetype. We have also talked about the Queen archetype. Today, we're going to give some definitions, maybe some thoughts about it, a little bit more precise. And we're going to talk about our sovereign who has passed, or Queen Elizabeth, the sovereign who has passed. So this episode will be a salute to her as the Queen archetype. 70 years. She's the archetype that walks on the earth. We know the archetypes exist around us in the energy, but do they have feet on the planet? Well, they've shown us that they actually do have feet on the planet. They actually walk. They have bodies. They have names. Okay. So, Christy, would you like to share with us some wisdom
about the Queen archetype?
Yeah, about the Queen archetype.
Well, I find the Queen archetype fascinating. As a woman, I think every woman has the Queen archetype, an aspect of that within her. I also believe that there's some that hold it more than others. And from what I've seen in my experience, people tend to label a Queen archetype literally as she's such a queen, or she thinks she's a queen. And I've also heard labeling of the Ice Queen, which would be a shadow queen, which we're talking about. And I think there's a light and shadow of each queen, and finding that within ourselves, I think is really important, because that archetype, the Queen archetype in my mind, has very good boundaries. She knows exactly what she wants and how to get it. And she directs her court accordingly to what it is that she feels like she needs for the betterment of all. And I think each one of us have a court. We have people within our realm, and understanding the sovereign, the queen better, I think can help someone live their life in a better way. What I also tell women that I see is, what would a queen, and I reference Queen Elizabeth, what would the queen stand like, for example, literally? A queen would never slump forward and not look at you or hold her head down. Her head would be up. She holds her body erect. So I will have women stand and practice standing like a queen, because we all know what that pattern is. Physically, not just intellectually. How does she stand? How would she move? Would she give an excuse or a reason why there's a no about anything? She doesn't give reasons. she makes a decision and the decision's made. There's not a lot of negotiation about whatever boundary that is. I would say in the light side of the queen. Shadow is another conversation.
Ooh.
But it's something that we all have within us. And I'm excited about today's conversation about how to understand the queen archetype better and identify it within yourself or people around you that hold that in a stronger way.
Ooh. So we've had several representation of the queen archetype in history. Currently, Oprah is a great symbol of the queen archetype.
Yes, most definitely she is. The queen of talk. There, she's even referred to as the queen.
She is referred to as the queen because
Yeah.
that is the archetypal energy that she carries. That
And
is
people
her.
listen to her as the queen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
She is a sovereign, and people come from far and wide to sit with her and talk to her. And she makes people who are not celebrities or known in the world to be known all over the world because all listen.
Yes. And all trust. I would say most people all trust her.
I
So
think
she has-
I think she was one of the primary movers of bringing back reading in the
yes,
country.
her book club.
Her book
I've read
club,
many of their books.
her book club brought back the idea that reading was fun, that reading was something that you actually could do as a group. She brought that idea back to the public. So when we think of the queen archetype, we also think of the king archetype, and we haven't had good examples of the king archetype. Modern king archetype would be the Pope.
We haven't had a strong king archetype.
We haven't had a strong king archetype. Yes. A king archetype that stands for, like the king archetype of King Arthur, somebody who stands for equality, somebody who stands for justice, somebody who stands for peace and order.
And someone who's loyal to the greater good.
Well, yes, I mean that's what
Really
makes them good, right? Not make them evil. So, I mean, I think of the queen archetype, I think of Amelia Marcos. She used to buy shoes, like thousands and thousands of shoes. Not enough decades or centuries to wear them in.
I would like that problem.
Well, that's the evil queen, right? She has all this power, and what's she doing?
Shoes.
She's buying shoes. Or Queen Antoinette, who said, "Let them eat cake." That would be the queen that is evil, not a righteous queen. The king and queen archetype brings stability. Their symbol is stability. They sit on a chair. They have a crown over their head. The whole adornment, the whole idea is to be the representative of the divine on the planet.
And then symbology of the crown, Dr. Lahab, on the crown is energetically as connection to source. It's not coincidental that it's on the head. I think that's important as well. We're looking at literal symbols of connection.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Even the adornments on the chair, on the crown, on the regalia that is worn, they are all part symbolic of the archetype. these symbols point back to the archetype. We've talked about this in other episodes. You know, the unknown soldier, the tomb of the unknown soldier. We've talked about the fire that burns. We talked about the guards that guard it. These are symbols. Those symbols represent the warrior archetype. Royalty has its own archetype. We have a new king. We have a Charles is the new king, the new symbol. So we haven't seen much. We will see more. We will get to know this king. So Christy, when you think of the queen and you think of the queen archetype, what do you see their importance is?
The importance of the queen. I think people look to the queen archetype for judgment. I think they look to her for wisdom. I think a queen can help calm people down when there's chaos. A queen has rules of right and wrong, good and bad. This is what we do. So structure within a community, structure within her realm that keeps the borders and safety together. So people are willing to serve her and support the process of her being a leader. That's what I think of with queen. And I've met many of them, and I find it interesting that when I meet a true queen, my initial reaction is, what can I get you and what do you need? Which I find fascinating. And that's, I think that's also an indication of a queen. People want to serve them.
That's the archetype, right?
Yeah.
When they're embodied, when the queen is embodied, this is why we talk about being embodied, being healthy, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, being healthy, physically. The more integrated you are, the more you are in your archetype, the more these aspects, these things that we talk about, these characteristics that we say, exemplify the queen or the king archetype. These are important.
I remember it was before I was married. It was quite a long time ago. And I went to a dinner meeting with my husband and his boss at the time. And at that time, I didn't know a lot about archetypes, but I remember sitting at the table with him and with this king archetype. And by the end of the meeting, I told my husband, I said, I would do whatever. He would be the best leader. I would follow him because he was an embodied king. And I have not been in the presence of someone like that since. That everyone at that table, there was probably 8 or 9 people. Everyone was in support of him because of his leadership qualities. And they all felt protected and loved by him. And I think that's what we're talking about too, is someone who has the capacity to hold that, like King Arthur at the round table. He's holding the energy of the other archetypes.
Yes.
That's a strong archetypal pattern, and being embodied, what that can give to other people.
Well, yeah, because
it's amazing.
The archetype is balance. It's the archetype that holds the 4. It's the archetype
So the
balance.
4 meaning, let's just reiterate, the 4 is the magician, the
warrior,
warrior and the lover. And we have the queen.
So we have the queen, we have like primary 4, we call them. But these 4 are held by the divine. Their power is in service to the divine. So it's not like the queen and king archetype get the best part of it. They have to make sure that everybody's in service to the divine, which is a very difficult task. You
Yes,
have a
because there's
lot,
lots of warring in between there.
there's a lot of rebels, there's a lot
Yeah.
of revolts, there's a lot of um, people who I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. Why are you the one who gets to tell us what to do? So they get a lot of that. They get a lot of the grief. So, you know, with power, there's other things that come. There are headaches. And this is how the balance is maintained. Because if there wasn't, then there would be power without consequence.
So the queen and the sovereign archetype is about consequence.
Yes. When there is no consequence, then we have invasion of other countries. Then we have wars.
Mhm. Which would be shadow sovereign,
yes.
creating war, conquering.
Using your police force to suppress your people and keeping them in line.
So is part of the sovereign archetype, whether that be king or queen, then is one of the attributes of it is control.
Yes.
Wanting to control either the people in your family, the people at your work, and or if you're over a country, other countries.
Yes. So that depends on the power and depends on the position.
So if someone's born with the queen archetype or king, is their inherent nature wanting to control others?
It's an unconscious part of their nature.
And when do you think it becomes
but it's
conscious?
Sorry, it's not control for like the lover likes to control. The lover manipulates. They don't. So the queen's control is with consent.
The queen's control is with consent.
Yes, you consent to her control.
I can see that because I've done that.
Yeah. That's the control. So when it's out of bounds, when it's evil, when it's taken over, that's when control becomes, I use the secret police, or I tax you more, or I don't let your children go to school, or I ostracize you, or make your life more difficult.
Do you think in a family system, then if someone's born a queen, I would think there would be a lot of friction around other siblings because the queen would think they're smarter than everyone growing up.
They're more bossy. They're more bossy.
They're more bossy, which would create conflict in a family.
Yes, especially if there's another, like, for instance, the other archetypes. So if there's a warrior archetype, then in a family, the queen and the warrior, it depends on the warrior, depends on the queen, but usually there is a hierarchy between them.
Yeah.
The queen and the magician have historically needed each other. They've always needed each other. They always move towards each other. The queen unconsciously searches for the magician.
As a counselor.
Yes. They're the consult. They're the ones that see what the queen and king do not see.
So for a balanced queen, she would have people in her life that are magicians.
She needs the archetypes.
Yeah.
And she has them in her life, whether consciously or unconsciously. The grouping always comes back. People group themselves. The
And
queen
so-
is always the council is always is like the girlfriend or the friend who is was like, oh, I don't do anything until I take their advice.
Mm. And they have an entourage,
Always have
is
an
what you're
entourage.
saying too. Yeah, because I've
Always have
seen,
to, their appearance is the way they walk, the way they hold
yes,
themselves, the way they sit, the way they eat, the way they look at you if you start eating before them.
I hadn't thought of that.
Oh yeah,
And that's an unconscious movement,
that's
isn't it?
exactly, yeah, exactly right.
Or they would sit in a certain position at a table.
Ahead of the table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
without being aware.
They move into those circles. They feel like, well, this is where I'm supposed to be. That's what they
And-
say.
And don't
This
we
is-
move around them?
Yeah. This is where
Right?
I'm supposed to be. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so-and-so has to be here, right?
Yeah. I've certainly seen that. And it's so amazing to me to watch an embodied queen versus a queen that's not quite fully embodied,
Yeah.
and literally how people just serve her because they want to.
Well, yeah, because she represents peace. She represents security. She represents the divine. She represents everything that creation is. She is the embodiment of that.
Hmm.
It's like having the great mother or the great father. The king and queen are the great mother and great father. The original great mother and great father. It's the grandmother that everybody went to. Had to talk to her before they did anything.
For the wisdom piece.
Yeah. This is what they represent. So they represent a piece of our psyche that is indispensable to us.
Mm-hmm.
Like we carry the archetypes. We carry all four. We can identify with all four. We know what it's like to be king or to be treated like a king.
Yeah.
We say these things, to be treated like a king, to be treated like a queen. But the king and queen, they don't necessarily want to be treated like a king or queen. They deserve to be treated that way. That's how they see it.
Be archetype.
This is the unconscious part of the archetype. I deserve this.
Which is why it would be difficult to have a sibling. I go back to families.
Yeah.
Because there's 13 siblings in my family, and I know of 2 queens.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking through the eyes of a sibling and how challenging that can be.
Yeah.
Growing up. And even into adulthood until,
Especially when they're not acknowledged. It's very difficult.
I've learned that that's really I think that's an important thing to understand for people if you have a queen in your life, to acknowledge them.
Yeah. When they're not acknowledged, it creates havoc for them.
Well, I think that's when war is created.
Well, because unconsciously it creates havoc for them. Unconsciously, this is not how the energy flows. I'm acknowledged. Right? I am held. I am the queen had over time, the queen had varied responsibilities, right? Difficult decisions. Now it's no longer in a castle, it's out in the world. How do I we don't have we see the queen archetype. The king archetype has hasn't been well represented.
No. How about I read a definition
Sure.
of the sovereign?
Yeah.
So the sovereign, they are fiercely loyal. They are
Ooh.
born as the divine child.
Ooh.
They are born leaders and organizers. That's probably a key word as well, as
Yes.
organizers. They lead with firmness and fairness. They represent everyone and are inclusive.
Ooh.
They are respected and are shown loyalty. They respect the psychic wholeness of the 4 archetypes.
Ooh.
They believe everything has a place and a purpose. That is also very key of the queens I've met.
Yes.
That is exactly what they say. Everything has its place and there's a purpose for everything. It's the archetypal language coming through them,
Yeah.
which is also, I think if people are listening, if you can begin to listen to your own language, it helps identify this archetype.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard not to recognize yourself as the king or queen archetype. It's very difficult not to recognize yourself. You are moved energetically in ways to elicit certain responses. Or as my brother likes to say, all they had to do was listen to me.
Because he's a king archetype.
Of course. So this is kind of one of his sayings. All they had to do is listen to me.
And so you as a sibling, your response to that has been what?
My response in the present or the past?
In the past.
The past.
Because that's, the past.
Well, I was his teacher, right? So I didn't listen to him. I didn't listen to him as the way I should have.
And did that create a battle between the two of you?
Yeah, well, being the oldest, strangely enough, there's always this unconscious feeling of that we were competing against each other. But I think it was the competition was because of the archetype, not because of the age of our age. It was the archetypal energy asserting itself.
Because your archetype is magician, his archetype is king.
Yeah.
And so as
the magician usually the mentor to the kings, as young kings, as they age, the magician was the mentor to the young kings. They were the teachers, they were the counselors, they were the fathers that the king couldn't be. They filled that role.
And that's what you're saying happened with your brother.
Yeah. But this all plays out like in hindsight, right? Unconsciously.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the past, you start looking at the past and it starts looking like a fairy tale and you're like, you're smirking.
Isn't it all a fairy tale?
Yeah.
In one way or another?
Yeah. It starts to be, it's like the pattern is there and you're staring at the pattern and you're like, well, that can't be the pattern. My life was different. No, there's a pattern and the pattern reappears and it shows itself. And within the archetypes, the pattern holds. And when the pattern holds, like, my brother now is king. So when he comes here, I treat him like a king.
And that works for you and him quite well because there's peace in that.
Yeah, there's peace and makes things flow better.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that you've both come to a place where neither of you feel threatened and you're more secure in exactly who you are in your archetype.
Yeah, and you're more conscious of it.
Yeah.
You're more conscious of the energy. And there's no reason to, like in the past when you were being irritated by the energy because you weren't conscious of it. You didn't know that this is how it is. My aunt, God bless her soul, she passed away. But my aunt was the queen archetype.
And how did that show up in her life as the
Well,
queen?
when, you know, she sat down first.
And everyone allowed her to sit down first.
Yeah, and she got to pick her seat. Like nobody ushers her left or right. She picks her seat. So because it's some kind of like sitting arrangement that faces each other. So she gets to pick her seat. She sends back the tea. She doesn't like the tea. She sends back the tea. Right.
So she automatically held the energy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the stronger the embodiment of it, that's what I'm hearing, is everyone around you feels that and responds accordingly.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
The more you're embodied,
yes,
the stronger the archetypal energy around you and in you.
Yeah, it speaks through
right?
you. Yeah, you could tell it a mile away.
And so with the queen archetype for women, I think to embody that in a positive way would be to have, when you have good boundaries and making decisions and taking action, because a queen would also take action.
She's also loyal.
Yes.
There's very important traits.
So like with your aunt, who's a queen.
Yeah.
I'm assuming everyone around her trusted her as that within the family.
Yes. Yes. Listen to her. Her wisdom was, this is what she said. This is what a diva would say. So they quoted her that way.
Which would make sense because she's the queen.
Well, yeah, she's the queen archetype. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite fascinating. And then so with the shadow piece of the queen, we have the snow queen, which people talk about. We have in Alice in Wonderland, the queen off with her heads.
Yeah.
A beautiful example of an enraged queen.
Well, yeah, because it's mine, but I haven't earned it. It's mine, but they haven't given it to me. It's mine, but there's always a but somewhere. I'm not embodied. I'm not supposed to be queen. I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable in my skin. I don't want to take care of all these people.
That's a disembodied queen.
Well, yeah. So disembodied, and this is where trauma, mental illness, this is where the road goes sideways. This is where, with all archetypes, why they don't feel like they're whole. People say, I don't feel whole. You know, I feel like I'm in pieces. I feel like I'm fragmented, or I'm not in myself, or I'm out of it. They use terms like out of it, not having a good day. This is kind of, there's the conversation around the archetypal, because it's an energy. Just like you said, it holds you, it's within you, it's through you. It's an energy. It's around us, surrounds us. or as Yoda calls it, the force. It's an energy. And that energy pattern is what carries us.
Let me read, Dr. Lahab,
Yes.
the definition of archetypes.
Yes, read us.
Archetypes express themselves in forms. Archetypes grow out of humanities, stories, mythologies, psychology, biology, and science.
Mm,
Archetypes are universal and transcendent.
mm,
Archetypes can't be explained away by culturism, behaviorism, historically social mixing, or geographic proximity. Archetypes are recurrent, appearing, insightly altered from everywhere you look. Archetypes express themselves in the drama of form, which is what we've been talking about. They inhabit every form, situation, character, story, symbol, or pattern that reoccurs through literature and thought, consistently enough to be considered a repetitive concept or situation. Just as all archetypes have a positive, favorable, bright side that points upwards, so also they have the one that points downwards, partly negative and unfavorable, partly chaotic or synthetic, but for the rest, merely neutral. And that's a definition by Carl Jung.
Yeah. So if you go back a little bit, if you go back to slightly altered to that line, can you read that line again? I wanted to talk about
find it.
that line by Jung. Archetypes, it should be all around us.
Archetypes have a positive, favorable, bright side that points upwards.
No.
So also they have one that points downwards, partly negative and unfavorable, partly.
No. We're talking about slightly altered. It's before that.
Let me find it.
Slightly altered in form. They're all around us.
Archetypes are universal and transcendent.
Yes.
Archetypes are reoccurrent, appearing in slightly altered forms everywhere you look.
Hold on. Say that again.
Archetypes are recurrent, appearing in slightly altered forms everywhere you look.
Slightly altered form, but they're everywhere you look. That's the energy that moves us. That's the energy that takes us from place to place. And when you are in conflict, when you are disembodied, that energy creates havoc for you. Doesn't mean it disappears. It just creates havoc for you. Because you don't understand it, because you can't move with it, and you move against it, and then you hurt yourself. You blame yourself.
So what would a havoc pattern look like for a queen?
For a queen, she ends up serving everybody at the table, and she has a terrible night. And because that's not her energy, right? And the queen does not serve people at table.
They would serve her.
They would serve her.
So an embodied queen would be someone who has looked at their past and the pieces of their childhood or of their life experience where they didn't feel like enough, or like they had a right to fill in the blank, to be, to have, to do.
Yeah.
Would be queen shadow or disembodied queen.
Yeah, disembodied queen would be, you serve and then you'd have a terrible night. You let people tell you things, tell you how to do things. And then you come back from work and you're enraged for the rest of the day. They develop tics when they're not in their energy. They develop tics.
I can certainly see how that would happen,
Yeah.
because it would be like a compression of the energy, and it's not moving out of them
Well,
physically
yeah,
either.
it's a compression, but at the same time, it's the lack of flow.
Right. Which
So
creates density in the
yeah,
body, is
it's
what I
the
mean.
lack of flow. The energy is not flowing because I am not moving the way the energy is asking me to move.
What I've seen with that, with clients that hold the queen archetype, because I'm looking at the body,
Ooh.
is, and I would say this is very consistent. The queen archetype that has not embodied her energy as the queen has a very tight, physically, lot of pain in the body, in the joints,
Yes.
especially because they're one of the issues they have is flexibility.
Yeah.
And what I see is pain in the joints, pain in the back, and
Well,
almost
that's the energy. That's unfortunate side effect of the energy. The
right.
energy keeps you stiff. It keeps you in a certain way. So yes, that's the energy.
So as someone becomes healthier, what I've seen on my end is their bodies literally become more flexible. There's less inflammation, less swelling, because they are saying what they need, having better boundaries, taking charge of their own realm, not of
Yeah.
other people. Let me be clear. They're not controlling people. They're ruling their court in a way that serves them and their court best.
Yes.
That's the embodiment of a queen that people will love and serve and protect.
Yes.
And what I love too is when I hear a client that's been a queen, because I've seen my clients for a long time. I'm thinking of one woman in particular, and she's 70 now.
Ooh.
And her whole life has been a struggle of getting people to understand her.
Ooh.
And she's done a lot of healing work. And now she said the other day, she said, I just love having my husband take care of me. He does everything for me. I don't even have to ask.
Ooh.
Or it used to be a battle because she didn't know that she didn't need to ask, and or she could ask.
Ooh.
I think it's fascinating. Once she came into herself, her pain goes down, her weight went down, her inflexibility is mostly gone.
Yeah.
And people just love her and want her to be happy.
Yeah.
It's so simple, and it's not.
Well, the complication is that I don't know that there's this energy that does these things.
Yeah.
I don't recognize myself as an energetic being. And therefore, I think I'm a solid physical specimen. Therefore, I can't see that part. And that just puts me back into, I am more and more disembodied.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes. And that's what creates disease.
Because I can't open my mind to the possibility that the illusion is that I am this solid structure. That's the illusion.
Mm-hmm. I think a better word would be a dense energy. Our bodies are so dense, and yet if we put ourselves under a microscope, everything is moving and changing every day.
Absolutely.
We are not solid.
We are not. No, not at all. We think we are. It's funny. We're not. We're not. We are a galaxy full of other life forms. Actually, what is called human is very little that we could call human. The rest of it is.
What's amazing technology in our bodies.
Absolutely. And now that we have more and more high-powered scopes, we could see those things.
Mm-hmm.
We could see out in the furthest of the stars, and now we can see how our bodies move and what's inside of them. No, there are complete systems in the body that keep you smiling and you don't know it, or keep you angry and you don't know it.
Yeah.
No, it's
And
the queen king, the sovereign archetype is a key to the other archetypes, to understanding the other archetypes and the way they behave and why they do what they do.
and how would you recognize the key? How would we look at that?
When you recognize there's a queen archetype, then you recognize that, well, maybe I'm not the queen archetype, or how is that? What archetype am I? Since we know this archetype exists and is right in front of us and people talk to it all the time, that's how we know, because it's so prevalent, right? It's in our face.
Right.
So that's how you start to recognize, it's like, well, I'm not like them. Or I'm exactly like them, but why don't I feel that way? Why don't they treat me this way?
Those are great questions to ask.
But then you start to ask those questions. That's why it's a key to understanding the other archetypes.
And understanding how you move within those four.
Yeah, and the energy. How far is the queen archetype from you? Or the king archetype? How far are they away from you? How far do you have to reach to feel like you can do that? I mean, because you need the other archetypal pattern in your life as you develop. You need to use them in different ways. You need to be king. Feels good to be king. It might not feel good to be king forever, but it feels good to be king. These are really important things, right?
Is it, I've heard it referenced as stepping in from out of child into your sovereign, from out of childish ways into sovereign or adult. So what do you think about that?
But that's kind of black and white. It's too simplistic.
Okay.
Because what happens is there's a gradual development towards the embodiment of the energy. Because when you're an adolescent, you can't, you want to rebel. I don't want to be this. I want to be this. I don't want to be that. I want to be that. So you start to take on different skins to try to see what you could be. And you always come back to you.
Yes.
Yeah. But the child is actually closer to the understanding of what they are. Because after you actually lose the child, it takes a very long time to mature into the energetic form that you already had as a child, that you flowed with as a child.
Yeah, I can see that.
So no, I don't think that saying is, I'm not sure where or what is for, but in this case, for the archetype, children are in their archetypal realm.
And they act it out. I've seen that with little superhero
Stories
all the time.
The queen
or magicians.
is there, the king
Yep.
is there, he has his posse, he has his people, he has his council, he has his, and everybody has a job.
Yes, they would have.
Yeah. No, this is a part of understanding how this works is watching children at play. Watching children at play, that's what you get.
Yes,
In
because
pure
the child
form.
would direct everyone, a
Exactly.
queen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've all seen that, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, um, with our families, we've seen it with, you know, when we were young kids, we've seen it
Mhm.
with other kids. We could actually look back now and say, oh, that's why they were acting that way.
Yeah.
When you don't know why they're acting that way. Why are you acting that way? That's not how to act. That
And that would
means
depend
that,
on your archetype.
well, that's exactly right. That's what it means.
Yeah.
That's not my archetype. Why are you acting that way?
It's exactly what happens because
Exactly. Yeah.
we look through our lens of how we're put together and
Yeah.
think everyone's put together the same way.
Yeah. That we're all the same,
Yeah.
right? That we all should be the same in this way. But it shows us something very, very different.
And so the more that we become embodied and heal wounds from the past, we really will incorporate our true archetype. And today,
Absolutely.
speaking about the queen, it's almost like I'm thinking of my friend that I was talking about earlier. As she relaxed into, once she learned about the queen archetype,
Yeah.
it was like a light switch went on, and she said, "Oh, well, I am the queen."
Yeah.
And then everything just started falling into place, and she started saying, "I love having things done for me.
Yeah.
Thank you." And there wasn't a battle, because it's been a battle most of her life.
No, it's a revelation.
It's just amazing to see.
Because things make sense.
They absolutely, and that's what she said.
Yeah.
It was at the conference, and she learned about the queen, and she's like, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
I see my challenges. I see my gifts.
Yeah.
And she's really started owning her gifts. And her body's also letting go because of that. Because the battle in her own psyche created a battle in her body.
Absolutely.
So very fun to watch that change in her, in the queen, because she never thought she was a queen.
Healing is a beautiful thing. I think this
Yeah.
is why we're both in this profession. You know, this is about when people feel better, things around us feel better.
Yeah.
The energy changes. The more positive energy you're adding out there. So for those who would like to become coaches, jam transformational coaches, if you want to change the energy out there, if you want to change the way the energy moves out there, come join us. This is about the movement of moving people towards healing in ways that are quite remarkable. Quick transformation towards movement, towards change, towards feeling better, towards better sleep, better physical movement, less anxiety, less irritation. Yeah. That's how, yeah.
I think understanding the patterns of irritation, of anxiety, all the things that you just named, as we understand them within ourselves. And JAMP is one of the avenues to help, I think, to help clear that and make a new pattern and a new pathway.
Absolutely. To put you back
It
in your
isn't
original
so hard.
pattern.
Yes. And doesn't take 20 years.
Yeah. You
because
have an
sometimes it
original
can be
pattern.
really challenging.
Yeah. You have an original pattern. That original pattern is your archetypal pattern.
Yeah.
And it puts you back into your archetypal pattern.
Yeah. Which is where your gifts are given and shared with all of us.
Absolutely. It's where your power lies. It's where your center, it's where your throne sits.
Yes. Yeah. So we bow to all the queens today
And the kings.
and the kings, very needed humans on our planet to lead.
The king queen archetype. So with that, we will be back next week with another episode. Christy, any last words for this episode?
Yes, I would remind people to feel into what, with the body, what does it feel like to stand literally in your queen or king, and hold your body as such, because people will respond to you unconsciously when you hold yourself in that, and you can practice doing it. Even if you don't believe that that's what you are, practice what it feels like physically to hold that, because that's a good way to step into it. And always a good practice when asking for what you need or wanting to have someone notice you, however that is to hold your body in that archetype. Because people notice the queen, they notice the king unconsciously anyway, and they will listen to you more so than if you don't hold the archetype. And we all have it, some stronger than others, but I would say start playing with it and see what it feels like. And the key word is feel, to come into your body and hold that.
Very well said. With that, we will see you next week. Thanks again.